The 4 bag hanging above Lucas Grant's bed was labeled saline, but the liquid inside it shimmered faintly blue when the overhead light flickered, just for a second, like something alive trying not to be seen, and Shadow, the German shepherd who had once walked through gunfire without hesitation, slowly stepped backward instead of forward. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just retreated one quiet step, ears pinned, eyes locked on the drip line, as if it were breathing. The room smelled sterile. Alcohol wipes, latex, the faint hum of recycled air. But beneath it, something else lingered, metallic and wrong, like rain hitting rusted steel in the desert. Lucas lay motionless beneath thin hospital sheets, chest rising shallow, a monitor tracing weak green lines beside him. 34 years old. Marine. Strong enough to carry a wounded man across a mile of broken terrain. And yet here, in a climate-controlled room with clean walls and calibrated machines, his body was failing for reasons no one could explain. A nurse adjusted the 4 without looking closely. Vitals are stable, she said, voice routine, practiced. But Shadow didn't move closer. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Because Shadow always moved closer. In Kandahar, when Lucas bled through his sleeve after a roadside blast, Shadow had pressed against him, steady and unshaken. In training, in chaos, in every moment that mattered, forward, always forward. But now he held his ground at the threshold, muscles tight, gaze unblinking, as if stepping closer meant crossing into something he didn't trust. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. A doctor entered, mid-40s, clean coat, calm eyes, the kind of face people trusted without question. Dr. Harlan Pierce. He carried a clipboard and the quiet confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. We'll increase the dosage slightly, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The nurse nodded. Shadow's ears twitched. Not at the voice. At the movement. At the moment Pierce's hand hovered near the 4-port. A pause. Barely noticeable. But the dog saw it. The hesitation. The angle of the wrist. Something subtle enough that no human in the room reacted, but Shadow's body stiffened like a wire pulled too tight. Lucas's heart rate dipped. Just a fraction. The monitor let out a soft, irregular tone. The nurse glanced up. That's normal, she said quickly, almost too quickly. Pierce didn't look at the monitor. He was watching the line, watching the fluid descend. And for a second, just a second, the blue shimmer returned, catching in the corner of the 4-bag like a secret trying to slip through the cracks. Shadow's breathing slowed. Deep. Controlled. Not panic. Not fear. Recognition. Somewhere far from this room, under a sky burned white with heat and dust, he had smelled something like this before. Not seen it. Not understood it. But remembered it in the only way dogs remember. Through instinct carved deeper than thought. A convoy. A container. Men shouting. Lucas pulling him back just before the air turned bitter and sharp. That same metallic edge. That same quiet wrongness. Back then, Shadow had barked. Loud. Urgent. Enough to stop everything. But now he didn't bark. Because barking would have been too soon. The nurse secured the line. Pierce made a note on the chart. We'll monitor for another hour, he said. Then he turned toward the door. And for the first time, his eyes met Shadow's. It lasted less than a second. But something passed between them. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. Shadow didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just watched. Pierce looked away first. The door clicked shut behind him. The room settled back into its quiet rhythm. Machines humming. Lights steady. Air circulating like nothing had changed. But something had. Lucas's chest rose again, then faltered, just slightly, like a rhythm losing its place. The monitor hesitated. One beat too long between signals. The nurse frowned now, stepping closer. That's odd. Shadow took one step forward, then stopped. His eyes flicked from Lucas, to the 4, to the door. Calculating. Waiting. Because whatever this was, whatever unseen battle had followed them out of war and into this clean, controlled space, it hadn't ended yet. And the one person who should have been safest here was the only one who didn't know he was still in it. The monitor skipped. Again, not loud enough to alarm anyone outside the room. Just a soft hesitation in the rhythm, like a drummer missing a beat and hoping no one noticed. And the nurse leaned closer with a slight crease in her brow, while Shadow's gaze dropped from Lucas's face to the 4-pole, to the thin plastic line, to the small metal hook where the bag hung. because something there did not belong. The room felt colder now, though the thermostat had not changed, and the hum of the ventilation system seemed to stretch longer between cycles, as if even the air was pausing to listen. Lucas's fingers twitched once against the sheet, barely a movement, but enough to make Shadow shift his weight forward, one step, then still again, always holding that invisible boundary he refused to cross. The nurse checked the chart, then the monitor, then the 4 connection, her movements efficient but slower now, doubt beginning to creep in where certainty had been a moment ago. "That is unusual," she whispered, almost to herself, and she adjusted the clamp slightly, watching for a response. Nothing changed. Not the shallow rise of Lucas's chest, not the faint green line tracing across the screen, not the quiet wrongness that hung in the air like a scent no human could name. Shadow's nose lifted slightly, drawing in another breath, deeper this time, and there it was again, beneath antiseptic and plastic and filtered air, that same metallic trace, thin but persistent, like something buried under layers that were not meant to be disturbed. His eyes narrowed, not in aggression, but in focus, the way they did when he tracked something half a mile away through shifting wind. Then he saw it, a small detail, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. At the base of the 4 hook, just where the metal curved into the pole, there was a faint residue, a thin ring of discoloration, not rust, not quite, but something that had dried there, something that did not match the rest of the polished steel. Shadow stepped closer, this time crossing the line by inches, his head lowering, nose hovering just beneath the bag, not touching, just breathing it in. The nurse glanced at him. "Hey, easy," she said softly. Distracted, still focused on the monitor, but Shadow did not react to her voice. He was listening to something else. Not a sound. A memory. The desert heat. The sharp sting in the air before the alarms. Lucas's hand pulling him back just before the wind shifted. That same invisible edge. It did not belong in a hospital. The 4 lines swayed slightly, though no one had touched it. A subtle movement that caught the light again, and for a fraction of a second, the liquid inside seemed to separate, a faint streak running through the clear fluid like a shadow passing beneath the surface. Shadow froze. That was not right. Fluids do not move like that. Not on their own. The nurse finally followed his gaze. "What is it?" she murmured, more to fill the silence than to ask a real question, and she reached up, steadying the bag with her hand. The motion stopped. The liquid settled. Clear again. Normal. Or at least it looked that way. She let go, shaking her head slightly, as if dismissing a thought she could not quite form. "Probably just the light," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Shadow did not look away, because the moment her hand left the bag, the shimmer returned, softer this time, but still there, still wrong, and now it carried a pattern, a faint pulsing that matched nothing in the room, not the monitor, not Lucas's breathing, not the distant hum of machines. A separate rhythm, independent, intentional. Shadow's ears tilted forward. He shifted his stance, positioning himself between the 4 line and Lucas's arm without fully stepping in, as if guarding something fragile that no one else could see. The nurse reached for the call button, hesitating for just a second before pressing it. "I am going to have someone take another look," she said quietly, more to reassure herself than anything else. The door remained closed. The hallway beyond silent. Too silent. Shadow's eyes flicked to the door again, then back to the 4, then to Lucas, whose chest now rose unevenly, each breath slightly delayed, like his body was waiting for permission it was no longer receiving. And in that stillness, with the faint blue shimmer returning in slow, deliberate pulses, one truth began to settle into place, not as a thought, but as a certainty carried on instinct. This was not a mistake, and whatever had been introduced into that line was still working. The call button light blinked once, then again, but no footsteps came from the hallway, no voices, no movement beyond the closed door, and the silence began to stretch into something heavier than before, something that pressed against the room like time itself was slowing down in all the wrong ways. Lucas's chest rose, paused, then struggled into the next breath, each cycle taking just a fraction longer than the last, and the monitor responded with a delayed, uneven rhythm that no longer matched anything steady or safe. The nurse glanced at the screen, then at the door, then back at Lucas, her calm beginning to crack at the edges. "Come on," she whispered under her breath, as if someone could hear her through the walls. Shadow did not look at her. He was watching the 4-line again, and now the faint pulsing inside the fluid had grown more pronounced, a slow, deliberate pattern that did not belong to any machine in the room. It moved with intention. It moved with purpose. His body tensed, muscles coiling beneath his fur, but he still did not act. Not yet, because something about the timing mattered, something deeper than instinct alone, something learned through years of waiting for the exact moment when action meant survival. Lucas's fingers twitched again, weaker this time, barely lifting from the sheet before falling back into stillness. The nurse reached for his wrist, checking his pulse manually now, her expression tightening. "That is not right," she said, louder this time, and she pressed the call button again, holding it down longer, as if force could make help arrive faster. Still nothing. The hallway remained silent. Too silent. Shadow's ears flicked toward the door, catching something distant, a faint shift in air pressure, maybe a footstep far away, maybe nothing at all, but it was not coming quickly enough. He shifted closer, closing the distance to Lucas by another inch, placing himself between the 4-line and the bed more fully now, his body forming a quiet barrier. The shimmer in the fluid intensified for a moment, a faint streak running downward through the clear solution, and as it reached the lower chamber, Lucas's chest hitched, a sharp, shallow intake that broke the rhythm completely. The monitor responded with a brief, irregular spike. The nurse's eyes widened. "Stay with me," she said quickly, her voice no longer calm, her hand pressing gently against Lucas's shoulder as if she could anchor him back into stability. Shadow's gaze snapped to Lucas's face, then back to the 4, then to the door again, calculating, measuring, waiting for something that had not yet arrived. Seconds passed. Too many. The pulsing in the 4 continued, slow and steady, and each time it reached the chamber, Lucas's breathing faltered just a little more. The pattern was clear now. Not random. Not natural. Deliberate. Shadow's breathing deepened, controlled, his mind moving through instinct and memory, through the desert heat and the metallic scent that had once meant danger before anyone else understood it. Back then, he had barked. Loud. Immediate. It had saved lives. But this was different. This was quiet. Hidden. Timed. If he acted too soon, would they stop him? If he waited too long, would Lucas slip past the point where anything could bring him back? The nurse stepped toward the door, pulling it open just enough to call out, her voice echoing into the empty hallway. "I need assistance in here. Now," she called, urgency breaking through her training, but the response did not come immediately, only a distant shuffle that felt too far away, too slow. She turned back, eyes scanning the room again, landing on the 4, lingering there for a second longer than before, doubt now fully formed. "What is in that line?" she murmured, not expecting an answer. Shadow's ears lifted sharply at that question, because he already knew something was wrong. He just did not know how much time was left to stop it. The hallway noise finally grew closer, but not fast enough, not nearly fast enough, and inside the room the space between each breath Lucas took stretched thinner and thinner, like a rope pulled to its breaking point, and Shadow could feel it in the air. Before anyone else could name it. The nurse stood frozen for half a second longer than she should have, her eyes locked on the 4-line, her training telling her to trust the system, to trust the process, to trust the chart that said everything was under control, but something inside her was starting to fracture under the quiet evidence in front of her. "This does not make sense," she said softly, almost like she needed to hear it out loud to believe it, and she reached toward the 4 again, hesitating just inches away from the line, her hands suspended between protocol and instinct. Shadow shifted his weight, stepping closer now, no longer holding back, his body aligning directly beside the bed, his eyes moving from her hand to the line, then back again, a silent plea that carried no words but pressed harder than any command. He did not trust it. He did not trust her decision. And somehow, she could feel that. The monitor skipped again, sharper this time, the sound cutting through the room like a warning that had waited too long to be heard, and Lucas's chest rose unevenly, then paused just long enough to make the nurse's breath catch in her throat. She pulled her hand back. Not yet. Not without confirmation. Not without authority. That was the rule. That was always the rule. Shadow's ears pinned back, tension flooding through his body, Because waiting was costing something now, something that could not be measured on a chart or reversed with a correction later. Seconds mattered. He knew that. He had always known that. But this was not a battlefield where instinct ruled. This was a place where hesitation wore a uniform called procedure. The door creaked open wider as a second nurse appeared, breath slightly rushed, but eyes still calm, still grounded in routine. "What is going on?" she asked, stepping inside, glancing at the monitor, then at Lucas, then at the four. The first nurse spoke quickly, her voice low but urgent. "His vitals are drifting, and I do not like that line," she said, gesturing slightly, as if unsure whether to fully commit to what she was seeing. The second nurse frowned, stepping closer, her gaze narrowing as she followed the line upward. "It looks standard," she replied at first, but her voice slowed as she leaned in, closer than before, her eyes catching something small, something most people would have missed. A faint residue near the hook, a shimmer in the fluid, a pattern that did not belong. She reached out, steadied the bag, and the shimmer paused again, disappearing just long enough to make doubt feel safer than action. "It might be a reflection," she said, but the words lacked certainty, and both of them knew it. Then it happened again. The moment her hand left the bag, the faint pulsing returned, stronger now, more deliberate, sliding through the fluid like a signal that refused to stay hidden. Lucas's chest hitched in response, a delayed breath that came too shallow, too late. The monitor followed with a sharper, irregular tone. The room tightened. The second nurse looked at the first, and for the first time, neither of them spoke. Because now it was not about protocol. It was about decision. Shadow took one step forward, closing the final gap, his shoulder brushing lightly against the bed frame, his presence no longer passive, no longer waiting. His eyes locked onto the four-port, then lifted to the nurses, then back again, as if asking the same question over and over without sound. "How much longer are you going to wait?" The first nurse swallowed, her hand hovering once more near the clamp, her mind racing through consequences, through what would happen if she was wrong, through the weight of acting without confirmation, through the fear of breaking a rule that existed for a reason. But beneath all of that, another thought pushed through, quieter, harder to ignore. What if the system is wrong? Closed around the clamp on the four line, hesitating for the smallest fraction of a second before tightening it halfway, not fully stopping the flow, just slowing it, testing a decision she was not yet ready to own. The effect was immediate. The pulsing inside the fluid stuttered. Not gone, but disrupted. And Lucas's chest responded, a breath coming in deeper than the last, uneven but stronger, like something inside him had just been given a moment of space. The second nurse's eyes snapped to the monitor. "Wait," she said sharply, stepping closer, watching the rhythm stabilize by a fraction, not enough to call it safe, but enough to make the pattern undeniable. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice low but urgent now. The first nurse did not answer. She was already watching it too. The connection, the cause, the line. Shadow's body relaxed by a hair, just enough to shift from tension into focus, his ears lifting forward, as if confirming something he had already known before any of them were ready to believe it. But the clamp was not fully closed. The fluid still moved, and the shimmer, faint but persistent, continued beneath the surface, slipping through in thinner waves, quieter now, but still there, still working. The second nurse reached for the bag again, this time not to steady it, but to inspect it more closely, turning it slightly, angling it against the light. The label read normal saline. The seal looked intact, but at the top corner, near where the plastic folded, there was something else. A tiny puncture, not large enough to leak, not obvious enough to notice at a glance. But it was there, a second entry point. Both nurses saw it at the same time. Neither spoke for a full second, because that changed everything. "This was accessed," the second nurse whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Not through the port." The first nurse felt her stomach drop, the realization settling in pieces that did not yet form a full picture, only fragments of something far more serious than a simple error. Shadow stepped closer again, now fully beside the bed, his head lowering slightly toward the line, his eyes never leaving it, because the scent had not changed. Whatever had been introduced into that bag was still inside. The clamp had slowed it, if nothing in the room had changed. But Shadow did not look away, because now the scent in the air had a direction, and for the first time, The invisible pattern began to form into something closer to truth. Not complete. Not yet. But enough to know this was not an accident. And whatever had started this had just walked back into the room. Dr. Harlan Pierce did not move closer to the bed right away. He stopped just inside the doorway, one hand still resting lightly on the door as it closed behind him with a soft click that sounded far louder than it should have, and his eyes moved across the room again, slower this time, more deliberate, as if he was measuring not just what they were doing, but how much they already understood. The second nurse's hand remained on the fore connection, her fingers tense, her posture caught between action and hesitation. Because now the situation had shifted from uncertainty to confrontation, and the weight of that shift pressed into the air like a storm about to break. "Doctor, this line has been accessed," she said carefully, choosing each word with precision, not accusing, not yet, but no longer uncertain either. Pierce's gaze flicked to the bag again, just for a fraction of a second, but this time it lingered half a beat too long before returning to her face. "That is unlikely," he replied. Calm, steady, the tone of someone correcting a minor misunderstanding. "All fluids are secured before administration." The first nurse swallowed, her eyes moving between them, feeling the tension stretch tighter with each word, because something about his response did not match what they were seeing. Shadow did not move. He stood still beside the bed, but every line of his body had sharpened, his focus narrowing entirely onto Pierce now. The scent that had filled the room finally aligning with a source, no longer abstract, no longer hidden. It was him. Not just the four. Not just the residue. Him. A memory surfaced in Shadow's mind, not as a thought, but as a feeling tied to scent and posture and tone. A man standing near a sealed container months ago, not in uniform, not part of the team, but present in a place he should not have been. Speaking quietly with someone Lucas had not trusted. Shadow had noticed then. He had not understood, but the scent had stayed, and now it was here again. The monitor gave a sharper, irregular tone, pulling the nurse's attention back to Lucas, whose breathing had grown shallower again, the temporary improvement already fading as the partially clamped line continued its slow, controlled delivery. Time was collapsing in on them. The second nurse made a decision. "We are changing the line," she said firmly, no longer asking, her hand moving to disconnect the four. Pierce stepped forward then, not aggressively, not abruptly, but just enough to close the distance, his presence suddenly occupying more of the space than before. "That will not be necessary," he said, his voice still calm, but now carrying an edge that had not been there moments ago. "You are reacting to a visual distortion. The patient's condition is unrelated." The words were precise, controlled, but they did not align with what was happening in front of them. And for the first time, the first nurse spoke up, her voice quieter, but steadier than before. "His vitals improved when we slowed the line," she said. "That is not unrelated." Silence followed. A long, heavy silence that seemed to pull the air out of the room. Pierce's expression did not change immediately, but something behind it did. A subtle shift. A calculation. Shadow took one slow step forward, placing himself fully between Pierce and the bed now. Not touching, not threatening, just there, an unmoving barrier that carried more weight than any raised voice. Pierce's eyes dropped to the dog, and this time, he did not hide the recognition. It was there, clear and undeniable, a flicker of something that had been buried under layers of composure. "That dog should not be this close to the patient," he said, but his voice had changed, just slightly, losing the effortless calm it had held before. The second nurse did not move Shadow away. She did not even look at him, because now she was watching Pierce, really watching him. The way his gaze kept returning to the four, the way he positioned himself between them and the door without appearing to do so, the way his earlier certainty had shifted into something more controlled, more guarded. "Who accessed this bag?" she asked, her voice direct now, no longer softened by doubt. Pierce did not answer immediately. The pause stretched just long enough to become an answer of its own. The monitor sounded again, sharper this time, Lucas's breathing faltering further, the urgency cutting through whatever restraint remained. The second nurse reached for the line again, faster now, ready to disconnect it regardless of permission. And in that exact moment, Pierce moved. Not to stop her physically, not to raise his voice, but to speak. "If you disconnect that without understanding the compound, you may cause a rapid destabilization. he said, the words coming quickly now, controlled but no longer neutral. Compound. The word landed in the room like a crack in glass. Not fluid. Not medication. Compound. The second nurse froze for a split second, her mind catching up to the implication. What did you just say? She asked quietly. Pierce exhaled slowly, as if something had shifted beyond his control, as if the line between concealment and revelation had finally been crossed. It is a targeted agent, he said, his voice lower now, no longer pretending. It was not meant to be noticed this early. The room went still. The truth, partial and incomplete, settled into place with a weight that changed everything. This was not contamination, not error, not accident. It was intentional. Shadow's eyes never left him. Because one question remained, louder than all the others, pressing into the silence with a force that demanded an answer. Why Lucas? The word hung in the air longer than anything else in the room. Compound. Not medicine. Not treatment. Something designed. Something placed. And for a brief second, no one moved, as if the truth itself had weight enough to hold them still. Then Lucas's chest stuttered again, a shallow breath that did not quite complete, and the monitor answered with a sharper, uneven tone that snapped the moment open. The second nurse did not hesitate this time. She disconnected the line. Clean. Fast. No second guessing. The flow stopped completely. The faint, pulsing inside the chamber froze mid-motion, like something caught in the act. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. And then Lucas drew in a breath that was deeper than any in the last minute. Uneven but real, filling his lungs just enough to pull him back from that edge he had been slipping toward. The monitor followed, the rhythm still fragile, but no longer collapsing. The room exhaled all at once. The first nurse pressed a hand lightly against Lucas's shoulder, grounding herself as much as him, her voice low and steady now. Stay with us, she whispered. Shadow stepped closer, placing his head gently against the side of the bed, just near Lucas's arm, not touching it first, just close enough to feel the faint warmth returning, to hear the shift in breathing that told him something had changed. Not safe. Not yet. But not lost. His ears softened, just slightly, the tension easing by a fraction, replaced by something deeper than alertness. Recognition. Lucas was still there. But the relief did not last. Because across the room, Pierce had not moved. He stood exactly where he had been, his posture still composed, but his eyes no longer neutral, no longer hidden. There was something else in them now. Not panic. Not regret. Something colder. Something calculated. You do not understand what you have interrupted, he said quietly, his voice stripped of its earlier warmth, revealing something that had always been there beneath the surface. The second nurse turned toward him, her stance firm now, no hesitation left. We understand enough, she replied. Step away from the patient. The words were clear, direct, no room for interpretation. Pierce's gaze shifted briefly to Lucas, then to the disconnected line, then back to Shadow, who had not taken his eyes off him for a single second. And in that moment, something passed between them again, not recognition this time, but acknowledgement, as if both understood that whatever had been hidden was no longer fully contained. Shadow moved closer to Lucas, this time pressing his muzzle gently against Lucas's forearm, a quiet, grounding contact, the kind that had steadied him in chaos before, the kind that did not need words. Lucas's fingers twitched again, stronger this time, brushing faintly against Shadow's fur, a small movement, but enough to anchor something real between them. A connection that had survived worse than this. A connection that refused to break now. The monitor steadied by another fraction. Not normal. Not yet. But climbing. The first nurse moved quickly, preparing a new line, her hands steady now, guided by urgency rather than doubt, while the second nurse stepped slightly between Pierce and the bed, not aggressive, but unmistakably blocking his path. The room had shifted. The control he had carried in with him was gone. But the tension did not ease. Because one piece still did not fit. Pierce's eyes moved once more, not to the four, not to the nurses, but to Lucas's face, and there was something there that had not been explained, something that had driven everything up to this moment. He was not supposed to wake yet, Pierce said, almost to himself, the words slipping out before he could stop them. The second nurse caught it immediately. Wake from what? She asked sharply. Pierce did not answer. Instead, he looked at Shadow again, and for the first time, There was a flicker of something uncertain in his expression, something that had not been part of his plan. Because the one variable he had not accounted for was standing right there, breathing quietly beside the bed, refusing to leave. Shadow did not move. He stayed pressed against Lucas, steady, present, his body a silent promise that whatever this was, whatever had been started, it would not finish without a fight. And in the space between Lucas's uneven breaths and the quiet hum of the machines, one truth settled deeper than the rest. This was not over. Not even close. The room did not explode into chaos. It tightened. Quietly. Precisely. Like everything had shifted 1 inch closer to the truth, and no one dared move too fast in case it slipped away again. The second nurse kept her position between Pierce and the bed, her posture firm, her voice low but controlled. "Step back," she repeated, not louder, just clearer, and this time there was no room left in it for negotiation. Pierce studied her for a long second, measuring the space, the people, the distance to the door, the distance to the forestand, the distance to control he no longer fully had. And then, slowly, he lifted his hands just slightly, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement that the moment had changed. "You are making this more dangerous than it needs to be," he said, his tone almost calm again, but thinner now, stretched over something that was beginning to show through. The first nurse did not respond. She had already inserted a fresh line, her movements steady and practiced, flushing it clean, ensuring nothing foreign touched it, her focus absolute now. Lucas's breathing followed the change, still uneven, still fragile, but no longer slipping downward. Each breath came with a small delay, then filled a little more fully, like his body was relearning something it had nearly forgotten. Shadow stayed where he was, pressed close, his head resting against Lucas's arm now. No hesitation left, no distance held, his presence constant, grounding, as if he was anchoring Lucas back into something real. The monitor steadied further, not normal, but climbing, inch by inch, a fragile line pulling itself away from the edge it had hovered over. The second nurse reached for the call button again, this time pressing a different code, her voice calm but urgent as she spoke into it. "We need security and a supervisor in ICU room 3. Immediately." No hesitation now. No doubt. Across the room, Pierce's eyes flicked toward the door again, then back to Lucas, and something in his expression shifted, not panic, but calculation adjusting to a new outcome. "You are assuming intent without context," he said, quieter now, almost measured, as if he was trying to regain control through words instead of action. That compound was not designed to harm him. The second nurse did not move. "Then what was it designed to do?" she asked, her voice steady, cutting straight through the space between them. Pierce hesitated. Just long enough. Shadow's ears twitched. Because hesitation, in a room like this, meant more than any answer. Lucas's fingers moved again, stronger now, curling slightly against the sheet, brushing once more against Shadow's fur. And this time the contact held for a second longer, a silent recognition passing between them, something deeper than awareness, something that said he was still here, still fighting his way back through whatever had been done to him. Shadow responded without thinking, pressing closer, his breath slow and steady, matching Lucas's rhythm as it rebuilt itself piece by piece. The door opened again, faster this time, and footsteps followed, 2 security officers stepping into the room, alert but controlled, their presence shifting the balance completely. The second nurse gestured toward Pierce without looking away from him. "Please escort him out," she said, her voice leaving no space for interpretation. Pierce did not resist. Not physically. He stepped back, one measured step at a time, his gaze lingering on Lucas for a fraction longer than it should have, and then on Shadow, as if recalculating something he had underestimated from the beginning. As the officers guided him toward the door, he spoke again, quieter now, almost reflective. "He was already part of it," he said. "You just interrupted the process." The words landed without explanation, without context, but heavy enough to settle into the room and stay there. The door closed behind him. Silence followed. Not the same silence as before. This one was different. Lighter. But not safe. Not yet. The first nurse adjusted the new line, checking it again, her movements slower now, more deliberate, ensuring everything was exactly as it should be. "He is stabilizing," she said softly, almost as if saying it too loudly might undo it. The monitor confirmed it, the rhythm still fragile, but holding. Lucas's chest rose again, steadier this time, and fell with less delay, each breath building on the last. Shadow did not move away. He stayed pressed against him, eyes half closed but still alert, still listening, still present in a way no machine could replicate. And in that quiet recovery, with the immediate danger pulled back just far enough to breathe, one question remained, heavier than the rest, lingering in the space Pierce had left behind. If it was not meant to harm him, then what had it been meant to do? The room settled into a quieter rhythm, but it was not the kind of quiet that meant everything was over. It was the kind that comes after something has been pulled back from the edge, when every breath feels borrowed and every second carries the weight of what almost happened. Lucas's chest rose and fell with more consistency now, not strong, not steady yet, but real, anchored, no longer slipping away between each pause. The monitor traced a fragile line of recovery, each beat slightly more certain than the last, like a rhythm remembering itself one note at a time. The first nurse adjusted the blanket at his side, her movements gentler now, the urgency fading into careful attention, while the second nurse remained near the door, speaking quietly into a radio, her voice controlled, giving details that sounded clinical but carried something heavier beneath them. Shadow did not move from his place. He remained pressed against Lucas's arm, his breathing slow, deliberate, matching the rise and fall beneath his muzzle, as if he could lend strength simply by staying there. His eyes were half closed, but not relaxed. Listening. Always listening. Lucas's fingers shifted again, this time not a twitch, not an accident, but a faint, intentional movement, curling slightly into the fur beneath them, holding there for a second longer than before. It was small, almost nothing, but it was enough. Shadow responded with a quiet exhale, a soft release of tension that had been held too tightly for too long, and for a moment, the world inside that room narrowed to just that contact, that silent exchange between two lives that had carried each other through more than anyone else in the room could see. The machines continued their steady hum. The new 4-line hung clear, still, untouched by anything hidden. And yet the air did not feel clean. Not completely. Because the words Pierce had left behind did not fade. They lingered, settling into the corners of the room like something unfinished. He was already part of it. The second nurse stepped back toward the bed, her radio clipped back into place, her expression composed but thoughtful, her eyes lingering on Lucas a second. Longer than before. "We will keep him under observation," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else, as if saying it might define something that still refused to settle. The first nurse nodded, adjusting a monitor lead, checking numbers that now made sense again, numbers that followed rules instead of breaking them. Outside the room, footsteps passed, voices low, the hospital continuing its rhythm as if nothing inside this space had nearly unraveled. But inside, the memory of it remained. Shadow lifted his head slightly, his ears shifting toward the hallway for a brief moment, catching fragments of movement, distant voices, something being handled, something being contained. Then he looked back at Lucas. Because that was where it mattered. That was where the line had almost been crossed. Lucas's breathing steadied further, the pauses shrinking, the depth returning in small increments, each breath building on the last, and for a moment, his eyes flickered beneath closed lids, not opening, not fully awake, but close enough to suggest something beneath the surface was rising again. Shadow leaned in just slightly, his presence constant, unyielding, as if standing guard not against what was outside, but against whatever had been placed inside. The room grew still again. Not tense, not calm, something in between. A space where answers had begun to form, but had not yet completed themselves. And somewhere beyond the door, behind layers of protocol and questions and quiet conversations, a truth was still moving, still shifting, still unfinished. Because if Lucas had already been part of something, then whatever had been stopped here might not have been the beginning. It might not have been the end either. Shadow remained where he was, eyes steady, breathing slow, watching over a man who had not yet opened his eyes, but who had not let go. And in that quiet, fragile moment, one thing settled deeper than anything else. Some battles do not end when the danger is removed. They end when the truth finally decides to surface. And sometimes, it waits longer than anyone expects. In this deeply emotional cinematic narrative, a wounded Marine lies in a hospital room where everything appears safe, yet something unseen begins to unravel beneath the surface. Beside him, his loyal K-9 senses a silent threat that no machine or human can detect, creating one of the most gripping animal stories where instinct becomes the only line between life and something far more hidden. As the situation escalates, subtle details like a flicker inside an IV bag and an unexplainable reaction in the Marine's body reveal that this is not a medical emergency, but something far more intentional, pushing the K-9 to rely on memory, scent, and an unbreakable bond forged in war. This story unfolds with tension and precision, making it one of the most powerful animal stories that explore trust, perception, and the limits of human awareness when compared to the instincts of a trained animal. As the truth begins to surface, the presence of a trusted doctor introduces a chilling layer of doubt, transforming the environment from a place of healing into a controlled space of hidden intent, where every second carries emotional weight and every decision could change the outcome. The Marine's fragile state and the K-9's unwavering vigilance create a connection that drives the narrative forward, highlighting why stories like this remain unforgettable animal stories that resonate far beyond the moment. As the conflict reaches its peak, a partially revealed truth exposes that the danger was never accidental, leaving unanswered questions about purpose, control, and the unseen forces at play, while the K-9 refuses to leave the Marine's side, grounding the story in loyalty and silent courage. This moment of recovery does not bring full closure, but instead leaves a lasting emotional echo, making it one of those rare animal stories where survival is only part of the journey and understanding the truth becomes the deeper battle. Through subtle tension, emotional depth, and a powerful bond between a Marine and his K-9. This story stands among the most compelling animal stories that remind us some threats are invisible, some battles are hidden, and sometimes the ones who cannot speak are the only ones who truly see. Character 1, 34-year-old white U.S. Marine male, strong build, short, military haircut, subtle scars, wearing hospital gown and dog tags, lying upright ICU bed, calm intense expression, front-facing portrait, cinematic lighting, realistic texture, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2, adult German Shepherd K-9, athletic build, black and tan coat, alert ears, intelligent amber eyes, standing full body side front view, tense protective posture, realistic fur detail, cinematic lighting, high realism, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. 1, a dimly lit ICU room with cold fluorescent lights flickering overhead. A 34-year-old white U.S. Marine lies unconscious on a hospital bed, wearing a pale gown and visible dog tags, his face pale and tense, while a full-body German Shepherd stands at the doorway frozen in alert posture, ears forward and eyes locked intensely on a hanging IV bag, where the liquid inside shows a faint, unnatural blue shimmer. The dog refuses to move closer, as if sensing danger. Cinematic close-up with shallow depth of field, hyper-realistic lighting, strong emotional tension, no cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2. 2. A quiet morning kitchen scene with warm sunlight streaming through a window. The white U.S. Marine sits at a wooden table in casual clothing, slightly rugged face with subtle scars, holding a coffee mug while staring thoughtfully ahead, his posture calm but emotionally distant, dog tags resting beside him on the table, while the German Shepherd sits nearby watching him attentively with a calm yet observant expression. A partially hidden photograph of military life peeks from under the Marine's hand, cinematic midshot, natural lighting, grounded realism, no cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2. 3. A peaceful suburban backyard in golden afternoon light. The German Shepherd runs across green grass mid-motion, full body visible, strong and athletic, suddenly stopping abruptly with ears sharply raised and eyes focused intensely toward an empty shadowed corner. While the Marine stands in the background watching with curiosity and slight concern, his posture relaxed but attentive. A subtle breeze moving leaves adds motion, cinematic composition with depth. Emotional curiosity. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 4. A tense hospital hallway scene under sterile white lighting. The Marine lies on a moving stretcher pushed by unseen staff, his face weak and eyes closed, while the German Shepherd strains forward beside him, body tense and silent, leash slightly taut, eyes locked on a passing doctor in the foreground whose expression is calm but hands subtly tense, creating a moment of silent conflict. Cinematic midshot with motion blur. Emotional urgency. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 5. Close-up of a transparent bag suspended in a hospital room. The Marine blurred in the background lying still, while the German Shepherd stands beneath the stand staring upward intensely. The liquid inside the shows a faint, unnatural swirling motion moving against gravity, creating unease. Reflections of cold light enhance the eerie detail. Cinematic macro focus. High realism. Emotional tension rising. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 6. Inside the ICU. The Marine's hand lies weakly on the bed, fingers slightly twitching as if struggling for control, while the German Shepherd leans closer, nose hovering near the line. Deeply focused as if detecting a dangerous scent, its posture protective and tense. The monitor softly glowing in the background. Cinematic close-up capturing both hand and dog expression. Emotional intensity. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 7. A nurse's hand adjusting the bag under harsh overhead light, revealing a tiny puncture near the plastic seal, while the German Shepherd stands in partial foreground, subtly shifting its body to block the line. Eyes sharp and alert. The Marine remains unconscious behind them. The scene filled with tension and quiet suspicion, cinematic framing with layered depth, realistic textures. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 8. Flashback scene in a dusty desert environment with warm tones. The Marine in military gear kneels beside the German Shepherd, both focused on a sealed container emitting a faint shimmering distortion in the hot air. The dog alert and tense. The Marine cautious and focused, mirroring the present danger. Cinematic wide to mid shot blend. Strong sunlight and dust particles visible. Emotional memory tone. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 9. Back in the ICU. The German Shepherd positions itself fully between the Marine and the stand, body rigid and protective, eyes unwavering, while the Marine lies still but visibly struggling to breathe. The monitor behind showing irregular patterns. Subtle tension in lighting and composition emphasizes danger. Cinematic midshot with strong character focus. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 10. A composed doctor re-enters the hospital room, shown in a cinematic midshot, his face calm, but eyes slightly calculating, reflected subtly in the metal pole beside him, while the German Shepherd watches him directly, without blinking, body still and alert. The Marine remains unconscious in the background. Lighting emphasizes dual expressions, tension and suspicion heightened. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 11. A critical moment inside the ICU as the flow is interrupted, the liquid inside appearing frozen mid-drip, while the Marine suddenly takes a deeper breath, chest rising more clearly. The German Shepherd leans closer with softened but still alert eyes, sensing a shift, the atmosphere tense but slightly relieved. Cinematic close-up capturing both faces and detail. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 12. A quiet emotional aftermath scene in dim, soft lighting. The Marine lies resting with eyes still closed, but more stable, his hand gently resting against the German Shepherd's fur, while the dog remains alert, sitting upright and staring toward the open doorway where faint shadows linger, suggesting unresolved danger. Cinematic composition with emotional depth and subtle mystery. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2.